Thank you everyone for being with us today, for spending part of your morning with us. You are joining a Avela webinar. We're talking about enrollment insights from 500 parents, actionable data for districts and schools. My name is Alex Weitzel. I am the marketing manager at Avela, and I'm joined by Mike Murphy. He's the marketing lead at Avela.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I've been working on this survey and this data and these insights since probably since the end of last year, actually, is when we kind of first had the idea. So this is a great culmination to all of this. We've spent time coming up with our survey questions, asking folks, getting the data, sifting through the data was obviously a big part of the job. And yeah, to be able to be here today presenting it is pretty great. You all probably recognize my name from your email inbox. I'm the guy that sends you everything. I'm real. I'm a real person. I'm Mike. Nice to meet you all. So thanks again for joining.
And I often will send emails with Mike's moniker so that people don't get.
Thanks, Alex. All right, so let's cover kind of what we're going to do before we jump in here. So first, a couple housekeeping things. We are recording this session. We will make sure that everyone gets a recording of the session, even if you don't, even if you've registered and aren't attending, you're probably watching this later on, or if you have to jump early, we'll make sure everyone gets it. So look for that either, end of day today or early next week at the latest. Next is questions. We definitely want to make this interactive. We have a couple polls going through the session, but if you have questions along the way, feel free to drop them either in the chat to Alex and I, or there's actually a Q&A panel or Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. I think it's at the bottom, that we can track those. So yeah, please ask anything. We may not have all the answers, but we'll try, and if we don't, we'll get back to you later on. And then, we've already unfortunately run into a couple technical issues with a couple participants. Please do let us know if you're having issues. Again, I would just say restart the Zoom and come back, but we'll make sure everyone gets the recording, like I said. So,
Mike,
before,
real quick on that.
yeah,
Will Hayden, he said he had the same issue. He clicked turn volume up in Zoom. So if you're having volume issues, try that as troubleshooting.
except they won't be able to hear us say that. Uh, so, before we get into, we're going to spend the bulk of our session talking about the actual data, the insights we were able to garner from that, and then make some recommendations, and then we'll move into Q&A. But before we do that, I'm going to turn over to Alex actually to talk a little bit about the research we conducted and how we did that basically. So, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So to set the stage, we want to give you pull you behind the curtain for the actual research that we conducted here. So in January of this year, we surveyed 500 parents and guardians via a poll company called Pollfish. And we really wanted to do this survey because Avella is passionate about making sure that families have accessible and equitable access to application and enrollment for the schools of their choice in the area. We want to make sure that every family has the right education for their child. And so we want to know, well, what are parents' experiences like? What are they dealing with? What are they happy with? What are their challenges? So that's why we wanted to do this research. And you can see here a little breakdown of the demographics that we surveyed. Gender, we had a majority of female respondents, 58%. For the school enrollment, we had respondents from different types of schools, so traditional and zone schools being the majority there with 86.8%. We also had 6% of respondents from magnet and 7.2% of respondents from charter schools. And we also had a range of environments. So for the majority of our respondents, 56.6% were in suburban areas, and then just over a quarter of our respondents were in urban areas, and 18% were in rural. So we are going to get into specifics about the actual questions that we asked, the answers that we received, and some analysis on that. And so for the first one, actually,
Yeah.
before that, let's
Yeah,
move on.
before we jump in, I would actually say this. So this information was all self-reported as well. So a little bit about Avela. As Alex said, this is our only slide on Avela. This is not meant to be a sales pitch. We really want to get into the meat of our conversation here. But very briefly, Avela runs a full enrollment platform from school finder and program navigation all the way through the initial application. We will run a lottery based on some award-winning algorithms, and then ultimately the enrollment, and of course services and support on top of that. So you can think about it as from the time people first learn about the school, want to find the school, identify the school up until that enrollment and first day of school. So that's really our sweet spot. And so we are very interested in how families and schools and districts and leaders think about enrollment because as I said, that is really our focus area. So any further questions about Avella, let us know. Check out our website, but let's get into it. So let me turn on our first poll here. Okay, that is our, oh, I guess you can see all the questions, so that's great. So we're gonna say, um, we asked families how they feel about the enrollment process. Very high level. Are they satisfied? Are they unsatisfied? So I'd love to get everyone to go ahead and take this poll. It should be popping up on your screen right now. So we'll give it a minute.
It looks like it popped up.
Great. And
And
the
so the
question
first
is, how do
question is,
you feel? Let
yeah,
me give a little bit of context. How do you feel about your district's enrollments? This is again not necessarily how you think the families feel, but how do you feel, right? So do you think it's great and there's no room for improvement? I hope so, honestly. Or do you think like, hey, this is, pretty terrible, we need to do a lot better, or obviously something in between?
we'll give a few seconds for people to answer here. Really, it's just to gauge, what are people looking at on the call? Is this something where you really want to improve a lot? Are you happy with your enrollment process and just want to see what parents are saying? Let us know.
Excellent. All right. Well, it looks like the data is pretty clear. We're seeing about 70% of you saying that you are satisfied, but there's a little bit of room for improvement. Unfortunately, about 20% are saying there's a lot of room for improvement, and no one is actually saying that there's no room for improvement. So I think everyone's pretty much in that like, hey, we still have work to do. But good to see that at least 70% are overall satisfied. I think, things are rarely perfect. So we'll talk a little bit about how we can get those numbers up a little higher. So,
Yeah.
Alex, yeah, go ahead.
Well, this is a great segue actually into our first question that we asked our respondents. So we brought this question to the front because I wanted to set the table a little bit for everyone here. We asked our survey respondents, how satisfied are you with the school your child currently attends? And the data, we split it up here between school options, is overwhelmingly positive. So for the most part, most of these families are very satisfied with the school that their child attends. So traditional, zoned, magnet parents, and charter, it's all above 80%, which is a really great overall number. And what you're doing so far is working for the majority of parents, and that's awesome. It does leave that bit of room for improvement, which also was reflected in the poll that we just ran. So that's consistent, but overall, doing great. And there's definitely, there's always room for improvement. So let's get into some more of those questions and how we can do that.
Yeah, great. So we then asked families, how do they learn about options in their area? And this was a single choice option between finding things online, in person, through their neighborhood networks, things like that. So Alex, if you want to show our answers here, the majority of people, the vast majority, are hearing about it online or through friends and family. The lines kind of blur there a little bit for me because obviously you can have friends and family on your social networks, things like that online, but in general, it's word of mouth. It's these in-person events of are kind of gone the way of the dinosaurs a little bit. Still 17%, but definitely parents are more likely to use word of mouth over those official school channels. That social media that your school is doing is great, but I think it's really about doing it in as many channels as possible to make sure everyone's seeing it. So it's that digital presence, it's in person, it's as I said, as many different channels as you can share this information. I think that's going to be a big theme that we cover today.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the next question. So this is about factors in school selection. We asked our respondents, what are the top three factors that influence your decision when choosing a school for your child? And here was what the survey showed. Academic performance was the highest and followed by school safety. And then after school safety was location. So diving a little bit deeper, charter and magnet school parents, they placed slightly more emphasis on academic performance than traditional school parents. And location is less critical of a factor for families that choose district school, likely because the assignment is automatic there. But academic performance, of course, was number one, but it was followed very closely by school safety, and then location and teacher quality after that. So I'm going to give you another second to look at that breakdown before we get into the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot the recommended action. So recommended action for making making parents have a better experience applying and enrolling in your school, I think is highlighting your schools and your district's unique approach to these factors. So what is different and unique about how your school approaches your academic performance? Highlight those outcomes that you have, your approach to school safety, location, teacher quality. Location is, is pretty much set, but teacher quality. Highlight those during your outreach to your community to really get more applicants and also just be upfront with parents about what they care about.
Alex. And you'll notice on that slide that, diversity was not necessarily a top three factor, but we did want to dig into this a little bit more. This is obviously a topic that's been in the news and in the ethos a lot lately. So we asked, how important is diversity? Again, it may not be the most important, but where would you rank it? And, considering that only, I think it was 14-15% said that they would consider it a top factor, two-thirds, three-quarters of people at least are saying that it is an important factor. So again, not top three, but the recommendation here would be to make the application an entire process as easy for a diverse number of people as possible, whether that is language, whether that is accessibility features, to really strengthen that diversity in that applicant pool for the school.
So we've looked at finding schools and about the factors that influence parents' decision. Now we're talking about the ease of enrollment and some different challenges and obstacles that parents face. So we asked, how would you rate the ease of enrolling your child in your current school? And this was actually, this data was surprising to me because as you see for traditional and zoned, which is the highest of the three types of schools, it's actually only 51% of parents found enrollment to be very easy. And we've seen, we've acknowledged that there's room for improvement. That is leaving a lot of room for improvement. And of course, we all want that number, that deep purple, to be as close to 100% as possible. But that's also taking the optimistic view that there's a lot that we can do to help parents along their way and to really help their experience with applications and enrollment. So yeah, I didn't want to address a recommended action here specifically because we're going to dive deeper into what could be causing these levels of enrollment ease. And we'll talk more about those in a second, but pretty interesting breakdown here.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks for not ruining my future slide. So we then asked about school selection. So whether this is using a navigator, like I said, or finding out what your thing is or where you're locally zoned for. But we wanted to ask, have you experienced challenges during the selection and enrollment process? And so it looks like people have mostly filled out the poll. So the question here is, what percent of parents do we think reported challenges? And the options were 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, 75 to 100. So the good news is that no one here thinks that more than three-quarters of people found it to be challenging. That's great. And then, yeah, everyone else is pretty much spot on. So the answer, or the correct answer, I should say, is that 60% of parents reported some challenges. And, I I wouldn't call myself an optimist necessarily, but I will say that when we first saw this data, I remember saying to Alex, like, whoa, 40% of parents find it really easy. That's great. And of course, Alex was like, no, Mike, that means that there's 60% of people that have issues with it. That's an opportunity to fix them. And he's right, obviously. And so, the top five complaints that we saw, and you can just click through these, Alex, is that, the process was too long. It was too many forms. It was duplicate questions. It just takes too long to get to the application and enrollment piece. Secondly, would be platform navigation issues. As we saw in the previous slide, about half are saying that the platform is tricky, and it's not that surprising. The enrollment tool, the application tool, is typically something that is used, once a year at most, and so the fact that it's not second nature to folks, yeah, I'm not surprised that there are some navigation issues there. I think there's an issue where there's no support, right? If you do run into an issue, do I call the district? Do I call the vendor? Do I call my registrar? Who do I get in touch with for real-time support? And this is often a stressful time for parents, as especially in lotteries, there's a lot of timeliness involved, certainly.
Mm.
Um, and again, that goes back into that technical problems, which I think this happens in every piece of software. But ultimately, what we really recommend, this goes back to Alex's earlier point, is that mobile friendliness. Uh, Tools don't work on mobile devices as much as they should. And at Avela, we see that about 80% of applications begin on mobile. They may not complete on mobile, right? As soon as people get into a document upload step, I think we know that's fairly tricky on mobile. But in general, as we see more millennial parents, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, people are spending more time on mobile, and so as much as we can make a mobile friendly platform is certainly what we set out to do at Avella.
Yeah. Okay. We asked our respondents an open-ended question. So we asked them, if you could change one thing about the school enrollment process, what would it be? And we did get a wide variety of answers here, but there were two themes that really stood out. There's one major theme, but a smaller one, was making the process fully online. I think that goes back to the point of making it a seamless, easy to complete process versus having to bounce from one device to another, having to go into a school in person actually to complete the application. Making it fully online would just make it a lot easier for parents. And then the biggest theme that we saw from these open-ended answers was more proactive communication from schools. And that really made me think about, yeah, parents obviously they want a fully online process and they want proactive communication. But the recommendation here is for communication, and this is something that Mike and I have even learned from recent conferences too, is that parents are really expecting communication before, during, and after the enrollment window. And where we have seen a lot of schools kind of fall off in their communication is after the enrollment window. Once a student has accepted or a family has accepted, and the first day of school is still days away, that the communication falls off during that time, and that does cause issues for the parent. They're sometimes unaware of certain deadlines or of updates, and can even cause problems for schools as well. Like students are still being pursued by other organizations, and if you don't really proactively communicate with your families and students, then there's risk that they won't show up on day one. So make the process fully online is one thing parents would change, and then a lot of parents would change more proactive communication from schools.
Yeah, and let's dig in a little bit more into how parents want to be communicated with. So we asked our third poll question of everyone here, how do you think parents prefer to receive communications? And I'm just looking at the data here, and it looks like we have some smart folks on the call. So yeah, the number one answer here was email. People want to be contacted via email. Second is text message, which is also what parents said. And then school website and social media were actually tied, and no one said physical materials. So You know, this is, you'll notice that these numbers don't add up to 100, right? This is a bar chart, not a pie chart. And the reason for that is I'm a parent. I have two kids enrolled in school plus another along the way, and I sometimes don't see my email. I sometimes may not see my text message. I'm probably not going to go to the school website, but the point here is as many different ways as possible to highlight these things. We hear all the time from districts, from school leaders that parents will come and say, "Well, I didn't know that was the deadline," even though you guys are out there putting it on your website, putting in your flyers on the bulletin board, on the digital sign out in front of the school. You think you're communicating it everywhere, but parents just don't see it. And so I think the big takeaway here, as I said, is as much as possible communicated across many different channels. It looks like we lost Alex for a second there. But just to kind of, Alex, it looks like we lost you for a second there. If you want to reshare there, or I'm happy to as well. But again, I think the one-to-one channels are super important. So as much email, as much texting as you can do, picking up the phone, again, more is more. And that really leads us into our overall takeaways. I think you can probably guess what the number one takeaway is from this survey that we found and from this presentation today is over communicating. Before, during, after, as Alex said, multiple channels. Really give as few excuses as possible for why parents aren't understanding the information that you're putting out there. Alex also talked about simple applications. As little, as few questions as you can ask, as few uploads as you can require. I don't know, Alex, do you have anything else to say on that point?
Yeah, one thing that we have recommended to our partner schools is only ask the questions that are really necessary in the application for you to run your lottery. Make you can, as long as it's easy for the parents to complete the applications during the enrollment process, you can ask for that extra information. But if they're faced with forms that have 30 to 50 questions and require a ton of upfront uploads, we've seen that completion percentage goes down pretty significantly.
Yeah. And then finally, I think it's maybe a little bit redundant, but as much digital presence as you can have, as many communications channels. As I said, we're seeing people less interested in going to the physical school fair, less interested in reading that sign out front of the building. And so, as much as you can do digitally, especially mobilely, and as I said, different communications channels, the better. So, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, Alex, that is all of our prepared content. We definitely want to get into Q&A. I've seen a couple come through already.
Okay.
If you have anything for us specifically, I think there's a slide with our contact information. You're welcome to reach out to us privately. Otherwise,
Yes. And I would just say to wrap up, Mike, before everyone put your questions in the Q&A. As you're doing that, I wanted to call your attention to the graphic on the right again that we've seen previously in this slideshow. Um, there's a lot of room for improvement to make parents' experience with applications and enrollment much easier. And Avela, that's our mission. We want to make it as easy as possible for families to have equitable access to the schools of their choice for their children. And if that's a mission that you share as well, and you want to improve your application and enrollment process, have a conversation with us, and we'd love to continue talking offline about how we can do that and how we can support your school. Here's our email addresses. Feel free to shoot us a message, or I just put in the chat a link to our contact page. You can fill out that short form there, and we'll get in touch with you. But as Mike said, time for Q&A. So let's do it.
time for Q&A. So we actually had a question come in ahead of the session. So it's a little bit of a cheat because I've had time to think about the answer. But the question was whether we identified parents of students with disabilities because the person writing this question basically said we found that these families their enrollment experience tends to be very different and they need different information that is generally available. And I thought that was a really astute question. The short answer is no. Unfortunately, we did not identify parents of students with disabilities, but it really did make me think. And I was sharing with Alex earlier, we have a close family friend whose student has a visual disability in one eye, and she's in TK, transitional kindergarten in California. at one school and is now with an IEP and is now trying to enroll in her, her zoned neighborhood kindergarten. And they think it's because of the IEP, but they're having a lot of difficulty actually moving from one school to the other because that IEP, because it's not transferring, they need a separate enrollment process basically. And, unfortunately, I'm sure all the admins on here are going to cringe when I say this, but they've actually gone ahead and created a second student and started the enrollment process fresh with her. So now there's this duplicate issue, which I know everyone deals with all the time, but I think that's a great example of how, in future research, we definitely want to pay attention to how we are addressing things from an even more equitable standpoint. Um,
Yeah. Mike,
Question came. Yeah.
we had a question about, and Lisa, I'm not sure that if this is Avela specific or for the survey, but she asked, "What about parents whose native language is not English? Translations? Question mark." And I mean, that made me think about that's part of Avela, of our approach to creating equitable access to education is we support over 100 different translations, and we want to make language not a barrier for parents to complete applications for their children.
Yeah, and for online, exactly.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that again maybe was a miss on our part because we take it for granted, right? One of our biggest features is this translation over 100 languages, as Alex said, and so we just presume that that's built in everywhere, and of course it's not, but definitely something that we want to look at. William, I saw you asked about uh, separating the data out by demographics such as race, school grade, geography. Race and grade, we did not. I think again, opportunity for future research there. By geography, we did actually. So all 50 states were represented fairly evenly, and candidly, the results of people having difficulties on the West Coast versus the East Coast versus Central, North, South, minimal, not enough to where what am I trying to say? We didn't feel like it was worth putting a graphic in the report here about uh, how people were experiencing it across the country because it was fairly similar. I will say there were a little bit of a difference in one of Alex's first slides. We showed, people could self-identify whether they were in urban, suburban, or rural environments. We did see a little bit of skewing there in terms of, people in rural environments feeling like they had less choices, feeling like they were locked in. But in general, everyone was, very satisfied and equally satisfied with their services available to them.
so we are at time. I think we have time to squeeze in one more.
Okay.
And she asked, "How do you find the balance between creating a quick and non-intimidating registration form and gaining all the documents needed to appropriately place the student?" It's a good question. How do you get buy-in from school staff on requesting less documents during the registration?
So this is a great question, and something that we've put a lot of thought into at Avela as well. So we actually separate the application and enrollment process. It's technically kind of the same tool, but what we like to say is for that initial application process, you want to make that bar, or rather those barriers as minimal as possible, right? So finding that balance of yes, we need to know how old your student is, what grade they're going into, and where you live. But maybe for that application, we don't actually need a birth certificate, a utility bill to prove that, right? We just want to get them into that system. And then, yeah, later on, once there's identified room and now it's, there's an offer and there's a seat, and now it's time to actually go through the full enrollment, that's when we say, okay, now we actually do need that proof of residency, that proof of a birth date. But I agree that I do think there is a a balance that needs to be struck between getting the information but also reducing the barriers. I think especially as districts and schools across the country are facing declining enrollment, any barrier that you put in front of a family is just going to be exactly that. It's going to make them, a percentage less likely to go through with that form. So in terms of getting buy-in from the school staff, yeah, it's a policy thing. Certainly at Avella, we have a team of support folks who really have some, research-backed. I'll go so far as to say scientific data to show that the fewer questions you ask, it takes about 30 seconds per question. So again, the fewer questions you ask, the fewer documents upload. There's a big drop off when you ask for an upload, and so. Um, yeah, we definitely have recommendations that we make around developing those application enrollment questions.
And one thing I want to call out there, Mike, is that in our user experience, how it's designed. We do provide that progress bar at the top that
Yeah.
can show the parents like how far they're into the application, so they're not getting one long laundry list of forms to fill out right away, and then they can also click in to see how it's broken down. So it makes it a bit more digestible right off the bat and less intimidating.
As Alex said, we are at time, but happy to keep talking. I see very little drop off. So, another question that came in was, if you were to run this survey again, what, if any, changes would you make?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think we've identified a couple things. We talked about certainly breaking up some more of the demographic issue in terms of grade, ethnicity. We talked about the special education processes. Um, I think there's also an opportunity to do more around intra-district transfers and choice. We identified folks who are going to a zone school, traditional school, and as well as magnet schools and charter schools. But I think we all know there's at least that fourth bucket of folks who are going to a traditional zone school. It just may not be their zone school, right? They might be going to the elementary school a mile away instead of a block away. And I think that would have been interesting data to gather as well, because that's
Yeah.
a different process, right? With intra-district transfers. So I think that's something that I'd like to identify in the future.
Mike, we had one from Eliana that I think you're better equipped to answer than I am. But
Okay.
she's asked, how do you prevent duplicate
Yeah.
applications? For example, current families that apply as new students. And you kind of just spoke to that, so I wanted to
Yeah,
let
I
you.
mean, this is an issue that you know, we see with every client, every district, every school, everyone uh sees duplicate students and or duplicate accounts from the parents, right? They forget they have an account, or the one parent makes an account, the second parent also makes an account, or they forget the password, and it's easier to just
Yeah.
create an account. So yeah, it's tricky. We do have some tools that can help fix that. Definitely one way we make that easier is allowing people to move from one device to the other, right? And so logging in, whether it's with email or phone number, or we'll text you a code to get in, or a one-time link as you switch devices, that definitely helps prevent duplicate accounts and duplicate applications. And then there's some, simple things that I think whether human or computer can start comparing, if there's a match between first name, last name, and date of birth, things like that. There's some automation that can be done to take care of that. But it's a good question, and definitely something that I think everyone in the sector struggles with, honestly.
Yeah.
Uh, and then there was a last question here around statistical significance. So, did the number of responses appear to be statistically significant? You know, this was a marketing survey, candidly. Um, there are 74 million students in the country. We surveyed 500 parents. So I think the real answer is no. This is probably not statistically significant. This is not an academic peer-reviewed study by any means. That being said, I think 500 is representative of parents. I don't think there was anything truly shocking in here that we thought, oh man, like we need to double check this data and go run another survey. Um, I also noticed, I compared actually the data. I think one of our first slides here showed that about 7% of students, 7.2% of our respondents said that their kids go to a charter school. I actually compared that data against the National Center on Education Statistics data, and they're also right in that 7% range. So I do feel like it was representative, although yeah, to your point, maybe not statistically significant technically.
Mike, we had one more come through while
Sure.
you're giving that answer. This is from Autumn, and she asks, are parents that apply for multiple different school years able to save their information to autofill the next year's application? That's a great question, Autumn.
Yeah, that's an easy one. Yes, they are. So, with Avela at least, again, happy to take this offline for those that are interested. But yeah, you create a kind of family profile, and you have your students, and yeah, you can apply for different school years, different schools, etc. You can rank things. Yeah, happy to dig in deeper there, Autumn. Thanks for the question.
Well, Mike, this has been a great session, and thank you so much to everyone who's attended and for spending part of your day with us and for your questions. This has been really engaging, and happy that we're able to run this survey and provide you all with a bit more insight into the parent application and enrollment process. Mike, do you want to say any last words?
Uh, no, just thank you again for joining. And as we said, we'll make sure everyone gets a copy of the recording, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you for your time. Have a great weekend.